May I use your glasses? What you're about to see is not a trick, okay? It's just, well, let's call it an experiment in energy. Well, everything there is
getting this?
is made up of some living energy, okay? So, you know, all this is kind of a dance or a partnership between the energy coming from me and the energy of the plastic. Now that's it.
Well, why can't we do it?
Well, focus, clarity of thought. I don't know. Maybe you can, Baines.
What about the UFOs?
I'm speaking to you from the Imaginatrix, a domain outside of space and time, a domain unknown to ordinary people. But over the centuries, exceptional human beings have learned the secret of moving between the worlds. The Imaginatrix is the land of all dreams fulfilled. It's larger than you can imagine. It's a universe inside the human mind, and it's where the future is going. It is where our destiny lies, in a place where realities are made of thoughts, and where the only laws are the laws of the human imagination.
Sitting deep down, feeling like Enoch, reflecting in meditation, chilling in the treetops with the Ewok, connecting in constellation, magical mystery, prophecy, energy filling me. There is no stopping me. Dopamine levels in sync with astrology. Planet is shifting like beings are calling me. Teaching in patterns of sacred geometry. Angels and demons have taught me theology. Speaking in rhythms of secret psychology. Honest, sometimes it just constantly bothers me. In a bed I lay in a trance state, summoning the voice in my head when I sleep. And not only awake from a dream in a state subconsciously place of bliss through the gates of harmony. 3:33 a.m. awaken when things go bump in the night, and I'm taken to foreign places, raptured up by your golden light. But my only fear is just falling. After all, I'm afraid I'll fight telepathically to keep telling me that everything is gonna be alright. Infatuated by the conversation, no time was wasted in a gate inside. Indoctrinated from the information with an aspiration to attain new life. Return to the essence, knowledge, innocent state of nirvana, no different equivalents. Optical Ryan, this process, I'm serious, chilling with the Ethereums on a mushroom experience. I'm a spiritual, indigo, lyrical, mythical, mystical, performing the ritual. Psilocybin's where I've been vibing inside to a cold style visual. Open your mind, 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 open the sky, open your mind, 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 o I ain't from this place. I'm from inner space and sacred geometric shapes. Macabre meditate, excuse me while I levitate. Escaping denser states, vibrate and resonate, translate to subtle from the base. Hubble telescopes the gate, my shuttle shuffle great. I'm gone, up and away. You didn't know we descended masters, must have forgot before and after. Laser tech removing cancer, passing speed of light much faster. Better catch up before you capture. Now open your mind, 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 open your mind.
This is the place where shamans have known of for millennia. They pass through the portals that normally are reserved for the dead souls, moving between the worlds. There's a technology and an understanding that you can barely imagine.
See time or feel time as going slow, which obviously to you makes it go slow motion. Okay? Makes sense, right? Their whole life is flashing before their eyes. So much is running through the brain, okay? And on the other side of things, you must hear about these monks and people who just sit down in meditation, and for them, it's they think it's been half an hour, but for everybody else, it's been 13 days, okay? This is because when they meditate, they can clear their mind so much that they perceive time so fast. It goes so fast for everybody else apart from them. Okay, so now you guys have the basic understanding and knowledge of how time works and why it goes faster and slower. We are going to do a little exercise, should I say. Okay? So basically, I'm going to stop talking soon, and I'm going to make the clock sounds get louder, okay? And all you're going to do is you're going to focus, or you're going to get in a comfortable position first.
Between the energy coming from me and the energy of the plastic.
Broken remnants of a past so vast it's spoken endlessly, toked in remedies, cloaked in the centuries, mists, entities, gifts of hope and compassion make my enemies switch from dope and the gnashing of teeth to passionate speeches and masterful pieces. They mask their weeping, but I see through the mask of their demons. The math of my teachings is begotten from astral regions, forgotten like pastures greener and vaster than immortal realms, where fauna souls roam, courted by elves on onyx and gold thrones. My phonics in bold tones, parley with noble goals and old souls. My global goal is to totally overthrow this wickedest of systems. I'm gifted with this wisdom to lift you with these glistening phonemes, riveting omens. If you're listening, I'm gifting your domes with the mysteries of poems and glyphs, glittering, shimmering tones as they're audibly heard. A prodigy with words, laudably spurred and confidently served to your minds and eardrums in rhymes that are fearsome to most, yet clearly a token of my heightened senses, enlightened like Zens. I write with the mightiest of pens, likened to lenses on interstellar telescopes. I've been through hell and I tell it in these spokens, brell it in these vocals, spell it in these tokens like spells that are quoted and cast upon the hopeless masses. I toast to the clash of the classes like Marx from June to Carl. I'm a boon to all who recognize it. I'm blessed as a wise kid, but it's a small step to insanity, even smaller to vanity's depths. The spirits in my shell demand of my breath's lyrics that they less them of the appearances of hell. They hear it in my tells. I'm a mesmer and magician, the best mathematician in neurolinguistics, blessed on my path by Sistren with verbal heuristics. I churn mystic potions in infinite oceans of cosmic proportions. My daughter's an orphan of religion. I'm a dolphin intrinsic. I splash in a sea of syllables. I laugh and see invisible things. Your wrath has a cynical sting. You should ponder the beauties of the earth. Truly you've been cursed by unruly persons' perspectives. I verse the collective consciousness of humanity. Monstrous insanities.
What you're about to see is not a trick.
Alright, I'm gonna try to make this first cloud right there disappear. They got a little piece right there. It's gone. Can you believe that?
The trappings of occult powers. Along the path of the truth seeker scours the earth for truth. This religion, this doctrine, that doctrine, to find out what is the truth of life, what is truth. And along the path, one stumbles into the occult powers of oneself, senses beyond the physical senses, attributes beyond the surface level attributes. And the reason I'm making this video is because at one point, I was practicing these practices, and I was called by my former elders of my former religions, you know, to be practicing witchcraft and this and that. And I didn't see it that way. I just saw it as a deeper understanding of myself, you know, and using these energies is the knowledge that I had come into at this time. And I wasn't using it for evil or anything like that, you know, as most people would think. I was just practicing with my own energy. And that's why I put these clips in this video. To show the occult power that one possesses that are unknown to man. But along the path of truth, many get trapped in this stage of just refining their occult powers. Many can move things with their mind. Many have clairaudience, clairvoyance. One of the things I would practice with my family is I have a tendency to mind read, you know. I wouldn't say it's strong, but it's stronger than most of my family. So we would play games where they would think of an animal. And more times than not, I would guess it, you know. And I had this keen sense to read minds. And I would even flip it. I would try to project my mental thoughts and have them guess what I'm thinking. And sometimes they could guess it. So I was trying to refine that. And it was all in good fun, you know. But many on the path to seeking truth or seeking liberation get stuck here and want to build up their occult powers just to be seen, and really because they are interesting. But as long as you're stuck in the false, in the sense of a self, you will use them against others and use them for yourself. And so that's why I am making this video. That's why I'm showing a few videos that I did in my early stages of these practices. It's just to show that these are not liberation. Although many from the outside take people who possess these powers to be liberated and free and godly men, or some would even say they are witches, you know. And so getting stuck here furthers your bondage into the play of life, which one truly seeks to be free from. And that's what I noticed. I was not at peace, even though I had these little, or while I was practicing these powers, I was not liberated. I did not find that peace that I read about. And so it came to a point where I laid them down. And I went on to seek truth, which eventually was revealed. And so I want to read a little bit of what the holy man Sri Ramana Krishna said about Siddhis, or occult powers, just to give you insight, because I see a lot of people, especially in the esoteric field, that get deeper in knowledge in the occult field, they always brag about these occult powers and try to learn them and study them as if this is the end-all be-all. But these are more trappings within the play of life, within the sense of a self, which is a falsity. There are many mental abilities that I could have posted for people to gain, like mental telepathy, mental transference, and things of this nature. And when I was ignorant, I probably would have broke them down and shared them in videos. But now I know that people will only use them for selfish reasons. And they're not true liberation, in fact. And so there's really no point in posting them. It would only be for self-gratification, as if I know something that others don't. And so I do not post some things because they are not true liberation. Liberation comes from being free from the self, being free from the bondage that you perceive you are in. And so that is my main focus. And so me putting up these videos now is to show you that I was once at a point of ignorance where I was practicing these, but these were beginning stages of seeking into myself. And so I want to read what the sage Ramana Maharishi said about supernatural powers and liberation. Quote, "Know that if aspirants who are making efforts on the path of liberation set their heart upon occult powers, their dense bondage will be strengthened more and more, and hence the luster of their ego will wax more and more." Ramana Maharishi. A questioner asked Ramana Maharishi, "Are the supernatural powers mentioned in Patanjali's sutras true or only his dream?" Maharishi replied, "He who is Brahman or the self will not value those supernatural powers. Patanjali himself says that they are all exercised with the mind and that they impede self-realization." The questioner asked, "What about the powers of so-called supermen?" Maharishi replied, "Whether the powers are high or low, whether of the mind or of the supermind, they exist only with reference to the one who has the power. Find out who that is." The questioner asked, "Are superpowers to be achieved on the spiritual path, or are they opposed to liberation?" Maharishi replies, "The highest supernatural power is realization of the self. For once you realize the truth, you cease to be drawn to the path of ignorance." Questioner: Then what are the use of supernatural powers? Maharishi: There are two kinds of supernatural powers. One kind may well be a stumbling block to realization. But what is the other kind? Maharishi says, they are manifestations of the power and knowledge, which are quite natural to you when you realize the self. They are supernatural powers which are products of the normal and natural spiritual practice of the man who has reached the self. They come of their own accord. They are God-given. They are according to one's destiny. But whether they come or not, the sage who has settled in the supreme peace is not disturbed by them, for he knows the self, and that is the unshakable supernatural power. But these supernatural powers do not come by trying for them. When you are in the state of self-realization, you will know what these powers are. The questioner asks, does the sage use occult powers for making others realize the self, or is the mere fact of his self-realization enough for it? Maharishi replied, the force of his self-realization is far more powerful than the use of all other powers. Those supernatural powers are said to be many and different. Wisdom, or self-realization alone, is the highest of those many different supernatural powers, because those who have attained other supernatural powers will desire wisdom or truth. Those who have attained truth will not desire other supernatural powers, therefore aspire only for truth. Although supernatural powers appear to be wonderful to those who do not possess them, yet they are only transient. All these wonderful things are contained in the one changeless self. People see many things which are far more miraculous than so-called supernatural powers, yet they do not wonder at them simply because they occur every day. When a man is born, he is no bigger than a light bulb, but when he grows up, he becomes a giant wrestler, or a world-famed artist, or orator, politician, or sage. People do not view this as a miracle, but they are wonderstruck if a corpse is made to speak. The questioner asks, I have been interesting myself in metaphysics for over 20 years, but I have not gained any novel experience as many others so-called claim to do. I have no powers of clairvoyance or clairaudience. I feel myself locked up in this body and nothing more. Is it not good to acquire powers such as telepathy? Maharishi replies, telepathy and such enables one to see and hear from afar. They are all the same, hearing and seeing. Whether one hears from near or far, does it make any difference to the one who hears? The fundamental factor is the hearer, the subject. Without the hearer or the seer, there can be no hearing or seeing. The latter are functions of the mind. The occult powers are therefore only in the mind. They are not natural to the self. That which is not natural but acquired cannot be permanent and is not worth striving for. These supernatural powers denote extended powers. A man is possessed of limited powers and is miserable. Because of this, he wants to expand his powers so that he might be happy. But consider if it will be so. If with limited perceptions one is miserable, with extended perceptions, the misery must increase proportionately. Occult powers will not bring happiness to anyone, but will make one all the more miserable. Moreover, what are these powers for? Moreover, what are these powers for? The would-be occultist desires to display these powers so that others may appreciate him. He seeks appreciation, if it is not forthcoming, he will not be happy. There must be others to appreciate him. He may find another possessor of higher powers that will cause jealousy and breed unhappiness. Which is the real power? Is it to increase prosperity or bring about peace? That which results in peace is the highest perfected power. And we see here that Ramana Maharishi, when speaking to this questioner, is telling him that there is no power greater than truth. And when I say truth, I'm not talking about mental acquired knowledge. Truth is the realization of what is and how life is. 95% or more of the world see the world in a false reality, and it is not truth, so they seek happiness through objects outward. In one of Maharishi's communities, he had a student of great supernatural powers, can extend his mind far outwardly, far beyond the seen and heard of the normal. Yet he had trouble turning his mind inward to find what Maharishi is talking about, truth. And so these supernatural powers that people get caught up in will not bring liberation. They only bring temporary satisfaction or temporary aggrandizement or self-aggrandizement for the one producing the so-called powers. And so the purpose of this video is to let you know the traps of so-called occult powers, because many in the esoteric world seek after these powers like they are the end-all be-all, like they reveal that you're holy or godly. And this is far from the case. So point being is that occult powers are neither evil nor good. They are what they are. The point of this video is to get you beyond them to ultimate liberation, to the truth without a second. There's only one truth in all of reality. And so to be stuck in the cities or the occult powers is to be stuck in the ego, stuck in the delusion, stuck in Maya, which veils truth.
Eastern view, which might be thought of as a mental monism, everything is mind, in which case matter is an emergent property of consciousness. From that worldview, which from the Western perspective, we look at that and say, well, they didn't develop cell phones and video cameras, so it wasn't a very good worldview. But another way of looking at it is that they're actually interested in other things. They're interested in diving deep inside consciousness as opposed to shooting out and being objective and explaining the world from an external point of view. What is happening within the past decade or few decades is that Western science has been listening to some of the claims of Eastern science about the nature of consciousness, taking advantage of 3,000 years worth of internal study. And among the very first things that are described, for example, in meditative practice is that if you begin to meditate, your body becomes calm and your mind becomes calm, and it has health consequences. So the neurosciences have begun to study this and finding that it's true. So that's interesting. So then you can say, well, what else does Eastern science say about the relationship between mind and body when you start diving in deep? One of the next things that it says is that there are elements of what we would call clairvoyance, or psychic phenomena, the Siddhis in the Eastern sense, that you bump up against when you start to realize that this idea that consciousness may be more fundamental than matter or energy, that is one of the things that comes out. Your internal experience starts to bump into clairvoyance. From a Western perspective, this is not acceptable because we don't know how brain and mind can separate, and which seems to be necessary in order for a mind to go out somewhere to find something that is not accessible to the brain. Nevertheless, Eastern science says brain and mind are not the same, in which case clairvoyance and precognition and all these other Siddhis are possible. Well, Western science has looked at this for about a century. It looked at the possibility that mind and brain are not the same, and has come to the conclusion, based purely on the empirical evidence, that there are aspects of mind that don't seem to be tightly bound to the brain. In which case, you can say that there's another notch for the Eastern science approach, namely that Eastern science said, well, mind-body effects should begin to change the mind and body if you start to meditate. That's true. Some psychic effects appear to be true using Western methods. Well, what else does Eastern science say? Because what we're talking about are the very elementary stages of the Eastern approach. If you keep following out on Eastern lore, you find things at some point of mystical union with the entire universe. At that level, the report is, the reports across cultures and throughout history, that the universe is not the meaningless object that Western science says that it is, but rather that the universe is permeated with meaning, and it is saturated with consciousness. There's consciousness everywhere, in which case, while the Western viewpoint is your mind, your awareness is locked inside this structure, an Eastern viewpoint, this structure is actually the entire universe, and you can experience it like that. So Western science has not quite gotten to the point yet where it's able to verify that that's the case, but I think the signs are very clear that that is becoming an interesting question, and methods are being developed in order to take Western science and move it along this continuum to begin to verify in Western terms what the mystics have been talking about for thousands of years.